Thank you, Gwen, for these kind words. It's been a pleasure talking to you for the past couple of days, and also thank you for your excellent piece in the Daily Maverick explaining why your institute decided to invite me. I also want to say thank you to France and to the team of at the Institute of Race Relations for providing me with this platform after last year's excesses. I don't want to spend too much time on what happened last year, but once I'm in South Africa, I want to put a few things on the record so people can go to the website, either read my speech or maybe watch it online, so they can make up their minds for themselves about what happened and the decision that was made. I also want to thank, in fact, the Academic Freedom Committee at UCT, because they stood their ground and they didn't want to concede to the pressure from Max Price to disinvite me. In fact, he tried to make this uncomfortable decision, not himself, but let them do it, but they refused to do it, and thanks for that. Max Price contended that if I was to speak here, it might provoke conflict, it might create security risks, and it in fact would help retard rather than advance academic freedom on campus. I hope you all feel safe so far. So in fact, he wanted to restrict academic freedom in order to advance it. As a good friend of mine, Nadine Strawson, a very prominent free speech advocate in the United States and professor of law, pointed out in a letter to Max Price, it was like the US general during the Vietnam War who said, we have to destroy the village in order to save it. I could have lived with, and I would not have commented on this incident if Max Price had put forward a coherent and decision based on some documentation. But the letter he published, in fact, did not mention my book that was published in English in 2014, and he could have read my book and made references to my book as a serious academic, but instead he preferred to quote an article in a grassroots newspaper in the United States from 2006 at the height of the cartoon crisis, when there was a lot of rumors and lies and half-baked truth going around. And apart from that, he quoted a Danish professor who has been biased against me and my position ever since, or even before, in fact, the cartoon crisis. And he labeled me a radical right-wing demagogue, I think. And Max Price chose to quote from this professor's review of my book, in which the professor writes about me, not least his enormous urge to gather any news coverage from around the world to show that, and then he quotes from my book, I was right and that others were wrong. So I wanted to prove that I was right and everybody else was wrong. That sounds maybe a little fanatic. So I want to quote, in fact, the whole context from my book, So you understand that I was in fact trying to say exactly the opposite of what the professor quoted. Here is what I write. I have compiled an enormous archive of comments and analysis on the cartoon crisis from all over the world. At first, I wanted to document that I was right and others were wrong. But along the way, I found that I needed to look inward, to reflect on my own history and background. Why was this debate so important to me? Why was I from the outset almost instinctively able to identify the core issue? Why did the abstract principle of freedom of speech speak to me more than it apparently did to other people? I do have strong opinions when it comes to certain things, but I'm not a person who takes an instant stand on just anything. I am a natural skeptic. I ponder at length and lose myself in layers of meaning and the many sides of an issue. I don't see that trait as a flaw. It is a condition of modern man, and indeed the core strength of secular democracies, which are founded on the idea that there is no monopoly on truth. Doubt is the germ of curiosity and critical questioning, and its prerequisite is a strong sense of self, a courage that leaves room for debate. That is exactly the opposite of what I in fact was quoted by this professor for. And I think it says a lot about Mr. Price's way of approaching the dissemination last year. But never mind, I'm not going to talk about him tonight. I'm going to talk about the cartoon crisis. In fact, for a long time I was fed up talking about the cartoons because I have been talking about them for so long. But as I traveled the world, I found out that when I do not talk about the cartoons, then in the Q&A afterwards, there are so many distortions and misunderstandings that I regret that I didn't lay out, in fact, what actually happened. So we can talk about facts and not about fiction. So that's why I want to recapitulate what actually happened. But I also want to put it in context almost 12 years after the publication of the cartoons. And I want to share with you how I, in the light of my experience, understand the challenge of free speech in a globalized world. I think the cartoon crisis is an excellent case study in the way the forces of globalization has formed a new agenda and a new way of discussing and talking about freedom of expression. But before I do that, I want to say a few words about the current state of freedom of speech in the world. It's not good. I understand from my conversations here that it's also not good in South Africa, and it's in fact getting worse. And in that sense, you are part of a wider trend that also today covers Western Europe and even the United States. Freedom House, a US-based think tank, and Reporters Without Borders, a European-based advocacy group for freedom of the press, just published their annual indexes of rating of freedom of the press and freedom of speech. And it turns out that for the past 10, 15 years, things have moved in the wrong direction. And there has never been so much regulation of speech in the world as we have today. And the new trend that this is not only in authoritarian states, but it is also going on in well-established liberal democracies like my own country, Denmark. In Denmark right now, we have for the first time in 46 years a charge of blasphemy being pushed against a citizen who did something stupid, I think. He burned a copy of the Quran in his backyard and put it up on his Facebook page a few seconds. He has been charged with blasphemy. We have all kinds of hate speech laws. We have laws criminalizing glorification of terror. We have laws criminalizing denial of the crimes of communism. We have in Denmark now a law criminalizing, condoning polygamy in a setting of religious education. And here we're talking about one of the most liberal countries in the world. And it is part of a wider trend. And in a way it's a paradox, because we live in a world where everybody who is equipped with a smartphone for the first time in history is able to communicate freely with billions of people around the world. And that has, in fact, implied a progress for our ability to say what we think and believe. But the same thing is happening with a smartphone as happened with the Gutenberg printing press and with radio and TV. In the beginning, it is being perceived as a huge leap forward for freedom of the press, but as soon as governments keep up and do their homework, they are one way or the other able to rein in this new technology and put it under their control. It happened with the Catholic Church and the index of banned books after the printing press was invented. It happened with all kinds of regulation commissions when TV was introduced, and we see the same with the internet today. 20 years ago, the digital pioneers in Silicon Valley thought that the digital technology would make people free. But today, in fact, the digital technology is being used by governments to surveil people, to control them. And governments say, you know, give me the internet in order to make it possible for me to control people living in my country. You see it in China. They have in fact built a wall. Russia, Iran, Turkey, and other countries are following after China and trying to learn from them. And all these countries are in fact pushing a new norm of international law that tries to make the case that the internet should also have national barriers, which is diametral to the way it was intended 20 years ago. So this is the state of free speech, freedom of press right now. I mean, we're not living in the Middle Ages yet, and it's still pretty good times in a historical context, but we are worse off than 10, 15, 20 years ago, even though we are better off than maybe 100, 200, 300 years ago. So I'm going to talk about the cartoons and the way the forces of globalization have changed our conversation and debate about free speech and its limits. I believe that there are two new factors that have transformed the debate about free speech, and they're not going to go away. So we have to deal with them when we discuss freedom of expression and the limits that are justified on freedom of expression. The first factor is digital technology. That means that what is being published somewhere is immediately being published everywhere. And it creates a lot of room for misunderstanding, distortion, and manipulation. When information travels, it loses context. So it has a potential destabilizing effect. And that is exactly what happened with the cartoon crisis. The context of the publication of the cartoons in Denmark got lost in Pakistan and Afghanistan, in Nigeria, and in other parts of the world, and they were used, exploited for domestic political considerations. If you take towns in Afghanistan and Pakistan where there were demonstrations at the height of the cartoon crisis, you go back 50 years. And if you take a town with, let's say, 1,000, 2,000 inhabitants, 50 years ago, they would, through their lives, maybe meet 1,000 people, maybe even less. And they would not know what was going on 200 kilometers away. Today, they know what is going on 5,000 kilometers away, and even though many of them cannot read and write, they are able to react politically what is happening in Denmark, let's say. And that has changed the whole configuration of our debate of freedom of expression. The other new factor is migration. The fact that people are moving across borders in numbers and at a speed never seen before in the history of mankind. South Africa has always been a diverse society, and still is, but this is a new thing for my own country, Denmark, and for a lot of other countries. Most societies in the world today are getting more and more multicultural, more and more multi-ethnic, and more multi-religious, with all its implications for free speech and its limits, because diversity is painful. When you have different values, when you believe in different gods, when you have different lifestyles, when you have different ways of understanding and looking at things, you will have clashes in a multicultural, multi-religious, and multi-ethnic society. And this factor is also not going to go away. So, some years ago, a Canadian-born media scholar, Marshall McLuhan, wrote about the global village. And he was prophetic in a way, and this metaphor or phrase got picked up later with the introduction of the internet, that we are living in a global village. We are all neighbors. But I think that McLuhan got it wrong in the sense we are not living in a global village, but we are living in a global city, or in a cosmopolis. A village is characterized by the fact that people in a village, they're very similar. They go to the same church, there may be one priest, one school teacher, and they live according to the same norms, more or less. But what characterizes cosmopolis is this growing diversity. So we are all neighbors, either virtually or physically. And we have to manage this diversity when it comes to the debate about free speech and its limits. So the key question in this new world, driven by migration and digital technology and social media, is how do we manage this growing diversity without compromising fundamental freedoms like freedom of expression, freedom of speech, and freedom of assembly? That is the key question. and I will give you my answer at the end of my talk. But before we get there, I want to talk about the cartoons. And those of you who would like to study this in detail, you can go to my book, The Tyranny of Silence, that is out in paperback, published by my employer, the Cato Institute in Washington, D.C. Okay, the cartoon controversy. How did it all start? In the fall of 2005, I had been in Denmark for just 1 year. I spent 14 years from 1990 until 2004 in Russia and the United States as a foreign correspondent. And I and my Russian-born wife decided to move back to Denmark to get a more quiet life in 2004. Things turned out otherwise, but never mind. And when I came home, I was appointed cultural editor, and the editor-in-chief wanted me to turn the culture section into a more international-oriented newspaper. And there I succeeded hugely. Maybe not in the way the editor-in-chief wanted me to. But it meant that I commissioned and wrote myself about what was going on the international scene, and of course also about Islam, integration, globalization, and the debates that it involved. But in September 2005, a quite well-known children's writer in Denmark by the name Kåre Blytken, he went public to the Danish wire service, saying that he was writing a book for children about the life of the Prophet Muhammad, but he had problems finding an illustrator for his book. And Blytken's implication was that some of the illustrators, in fact, were afraid of taking on this job. And in Denmark, when we publish a children's book, it is usually with illustrations of the main character. I think it's the same here, and in most countries in the world. So this story was on the wire service, and it was on the front page of every newspaper in Denmark. I think it was September 16th, 2005. Also in my newspaper. And we published some of the illustrations from the book. I forgot to mention that the illustrator who finally accepted to do the job insisted on anonymity, which is a form of self-censorship. You do not want to appear under your own name because you're afraid of what might happen to you if you do it. And let me here give you my definition of self-censorship. I was on national radio this morning having a debate with a leader of the Muslim community in South Africa, and he made the point, well, we censor ourselves all the time, so that's not bad. I did not have the opportunity to reply on air, but let me give you my definition and why I believe that this is a flawed argument. I believe in good manners. I try to be polite when I talk to other people, and I like when people are polite vis-à-vis me. But this is something we choose ourselves, and we have in etiquette. We're going to have dinner afterwards, and I don't think that people will eat with their hands or eat in a very loud way. That is the etiquette. But it is something that we impose on ourselves voluntarily. Self-censorship is a very different thing. It is when you say, I would like to say this, but I am afraid of saying it because I'm afraid what might happen to me if I do it. And that is a very, very different thing. It has to do with intimidation of the public space, fear, And this is in fact what is going on in most tyrannies and authoritarian countries in the world, where censors, they don't have that much work because people internalize the censorship very quickly. So you don't have many court cases in China or in the Soviet Union or North Korea because people know and they internalize these limits that are being imposed. And we have done that, in fact, in Europe with the Prophet Muhammad. No newspapers in Europe publish cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad anymore. Not because they don't want to. They would like to do it because sometimes it's relevant as documentations to a news story. They don't do it because they are afraid. So in that sense, we are living not in a free society, but in a fear society. And that is, in fact, what self-censorship is about. Okay, Blütgen goes on the record, says I'm having, I have experienced fear among illustrators when it comes to depicting the prophet in a very neutral way for children. It's on the front page on every newspaper, and then we called writers, painters, translators, cartoonists to ask, is there self-censorship or not? To cover this story the first time around. And we published that. Then, the Monday after this happened, we had an editorial meeting at the newspaper, and we had a debate about how can we follow up on this story. And at this point, there was a big debate about whether Blütgen was just doing this for publicity, because he was the only source for this information. We had no independent confirmation of this news story. And then a reporter proposed, why don't we invite illustrators or cartoonists to draw the prophet so we can find out if there is self-censorship or not. And that idea landed on my table. And it makes sense. It's a very good journalistic idea. We have a principle in journalism that says, don't tell, show it. This is a very good example of not talking about it, but in fact demonstrating in action how you relate to this challenge of depicting the prophet or not. So that same evening I wrote a letter to all the members of Danish Cartoonist Association, and I received 12 cartoons from 25 active members within a week or so. But because we didn't know, we didn't have independent information of Blütgen's story, we withheld the cartoons for 10 days. We didn't publish them, because we were not sure if this was a legitimate news story, just one case, or whether it was part of a wider trend. And in those 7 to 10 days, several things happened that convinced me that this was a story that we had to publish. First, there was a case in London at the Tate Gallery, the big national gallery in the UK, where a British avant-gardist artist had a retrospective exhibition, and there was an installation in that exhibition called God is Great. And it was a copy of the Bible, of the Quran, and of the Talmud, the holy books of the 3 big Abrahamic religions. And they were torn into pieces and layered in a piece of glass. And the director of the museum decided to remove that installation from the exhibition without asking the artist, without asking the curator, without asking London police if there was any threat, and without asking Jews, Muslims, or Christians if they were in any way offended by this piece of art. So that was a clear example of self-censorship when it comes to dealing with Islam. Another similar case took place at another museum in Gothenburg, Sweden, where an Algerian-born female artist had a painting depicting a man and a woman having sex, and on top of the painting was the first verse from the Quran. The painting was exhibited, a wave of complaints from Muslims who called on the director of the museum and said you had to remove this piece of art. We are very offended by this. And the director, once again, without asking the artist, without asking the curator, removed this painting, which in fact triggered a counter-demonstration by an Iranian female artist who had fled a theocracy. And she demonstrated for several weeks in front of the museum, insisting that this painting be reinstated. It was not, even though she was very offended and said, I did not flee a theocracy, come to Sweden in order to be subjected to the same kind of censorship. It didn't help. I guess I know why. She didn't threaten anyone. Then this was a second example of self-censorship. Then a Danish stand-up comedian, maybe the most famous stand-up comedian in Denmark, he gave an interview to my newspaper in which he said, you know, I'm not afraid of mocking the Bible in front of a camera, but I'm afraid of doing the same with the Quran, and it annoys me. So he was in fact admitting that as a comedian, he made a difference between the way he would treat Islam and Christianity when it comes to satire. And that was a third example of self-censorship. Then, a book by Ayaan Hirsi Ali, the Somalia-born former Dutch politician who now resides in the US, who is a former Muslim, who has written three quite critical books of Islam. A book of her essays was published in several Western European countries at this time. And it turned out that many of the translators also insisted on anonymity. And in one edition of the book in Finland, the editor, without asking Ayaan, removed a sentence mocking the Prophet. That was not even self-censorship, this was censorship, outright censorship. So that was a fourth case of censorship or self-censorship. And also around that time, a story surfaced that an associate professor of Judaic or Islamic studies in Copenhagen, he had been invited to a class at Copenhagen University to recite the Quran. Later on, he was beaten up by some young Muslims and thrown out of a car in Copenhagen. And why? Because the Muslims said, you as a non-Muslim are not allowed to read from the Holy Book. So yeah, you had a fifth example here of violence and discrimination between Muslims and non-Muslims when it comes to the right to read the Quran. And then finally, there was a meeting in Copenhagen between the Danish Prime Minister and a group of imams. And in that meeting, two of the imams called on the Prime Minister to make his influence on the Danish press in order to get more positive coverage of Islam. If you translate that into the power of language, it was a call for censorship. It was a call for using the tools of state power to get a specific point of view into the press. After the meeting, these two imams told the press that they wanted new laws that would criminalize criticism of Islam. So you had these 4 or 5 cases within the course of 1 week or 10 days. Apart from the children's book and the self-censorship regarding the illustrations of the prophet. And that convinced me that we had to publish those cartoons that I had commissioned, and I wrote a short text laying out the reasoning behind the publication, and making a reference to my experience in the Soviet Union. I graduated in Russian language and literature. My wife was born in the Soviet Union. I used to work as a translator of Russian literature into Danish, and I had a lot of friends among Soviet dissidents, and worked with them in the Danish Refugee Council before I became a journalist. And there you could go to jail for telling a joke. During the times of Stalin, you could in fact end up 10 years in a labor camp if you told a joke about communism or Stalin or whatever. So that was in fact the context. So when people, make the point that these cartoons came out of the blue, and why did you have to do that? Why did you have to publish them? Why deliberately offend Muslims and so on and so forth? I did not think about that. And I think, as I laid out here, there was a legitimate case for pursuing this story, because there was a growing trend of self-censorship when it comes to dealing with Islam. And unfortunately, if we fast move forward to today, back then, I in fact had two questions on my mind commissioning those cartoons. One was, is there self-censorship or not? Some said yes, others said no. And the other question was, if there is self-censorship, is that self-censorship based in a real fear or in a fictional fear? Sometimes people are afraid for no reasons. Today, almost 12 years later, we can answer both questions in the affirmative. Yes, there is self-censorship, and yes, the fear is real, because people have been killed. Paris, Kurt Westergaard, the cartoonist who made the cartoon of the prophet with his bird, with a bomb in his turban, was nearly killed January 2nd, 2010. And I myself have to live with bodyguards around the clock when I'm in Europe. Everywhere I go, I'm not a politician, I'm not very rich, so there's nothing to come after. I'm just a former editor who commissioned some cartoons, and I have to walk around wherever I go and travel with security, and for a reason. I also want to make another point, because many of my critics says that the cartoons, they are stereotyping and demonizing a group that is already weak and marginalized within Danish society. I agree that, in fact, Muslims in Denmark and Europe on some fronts do have a hard time, that there is a demonization going on. There are people who speak out in favor of limiting the rights of Muslims, but I'm not one of these individuals. In fact, in the summer of 2015, I had a heated public debate with Geert Wilders, the Dutch anti-Muslim politician, in which I criticized him for undermining the two fundamental principles in a liberal democracy when it comes to treatment of Muslims and Islam: equality and freedom. Wilders wants to ban the Quran, he wants to ban faith-based schools, and he wants to close mosques. At the same time, he's in favor of faith-based schools for other religions. He's not in favor of banning the Bible or the Hindus and the Buddhists' holy books, and he's not in favor of closing churches and other houses of prayer. So he is not willing to provide equality and freedom to Muslims, while in fact I have been defending also radical Muslims' right to hate speech, to condoning polygamy, to speak out in favor of inequality between man and woman, to speak out in favor of Holocaust denial, and so on and so forth. Not because I agree with them, but because I think democracy is also about providing space to undemocratic views, as long as people do not incite violence and incite criminal activity. Coming back to the cartoons, I usually, when I'm confronted with this criticism, I say that I perceive the publication of the cartoons as an integration project, as a project that was intended to promote integration of Danish Muslims into a long-held tradition of religious satire. And in doing so, I said to Muslims in Denmark, we do not expect more of you. We do not expect less of you, but we expect of you exactly the same as we do of every other individual and group in Danish society. And in that fact lies a recognition of your equality and freedom of religion in Denmark. We do not say to you, you are strangers, you are outsiders that we have to treat as guests. You are here to stay, and therefore we insist on equal treatment before the law, and you will also have to put up with religious satire as Christians and Buddhists and Hindus and as other believers do. I know that a lot of people will not agree with that, but I still believe that's the case. And in fact, one of the imams who incited an international campaign against Denmark, and he was among the people who took me and the newspaper to court, and they were defeated in 3 court cases in Denmark. And after having lost the court case, he said on Danish television, I thought, in fact, what Jyllandsposten and Flemming did was a criminal offense. Today, I have learned that that's not the case. So, if I disagree, I can leave the country or I can stay. And he decided to stay, and I think this is a very, very practical incident of integration. This man learned about what it means to be a citizen and what kinds of rights and obligations we have to live with as citizens in Denmark. All of this doesn't mean that I am in favor of offending other people. I'm not. But I just believe that in a diverse society, it is very difficult to avoid clashes that also implies giving or taking offense. So, 10 years later, 11 years later, the height of the crisis, do I regret? Are there things that I would have done in a different way? I'm quite often asked that question, and I think some of you might want to ask me today, so I'm answering it in advance. I don't think that a cartoon is worth a single human life, of course not. But the challenge in this case is, what do you do as an editor, as a journalist, or as a citizen when there are other people who think that way? Should you cave in? Should you say, okay, this is not that important? Or should you insist that this is your right and you're willing to defend it, even though you don't think a cartoon is worth a single human life? And I am of the belief that if you give in to intimidation, threats, and violence, and I think history tells us so you will not get less of it. You will get more, because you tell the people who intimidate, threaten and use violence that it works. So then why stop? But this is also about who I am and what I believe in. You know, I'm not a religious person, at least not in the way that I adhere to one of the traditional religions. I don't go to church. But it doesn't mean that I don't believe in anything, that I don't have any values. And as somebody who as a very young man went to the Soviet Union and experienced what happened to people when they are being oppressed and when they are not being allowed to speak their mind, that made a huge impression on me. And the dissidents in the Soviet Union are the role models and heroes of my life. And it would be very difficult for me to look at myself in the mirror if I, on the one hand, admired them, but on the other hand, I would not be able to mirror myself in their way of defending what they believed in. And I think that's part of the explanation why I decided that this is worth standing up for, but it's also because if you give in once, then you start going down a slippery slope. And I have arrived at the conclusion that, you know, I may not be able to make that much of a difference anymore, at least in Denmark. I have spoken about this many times. I have in fact written not only this book, but 2 other books about freedom of expression in the aftermath of the cartoon crisis. But I'm starting to think about my grandkids and what comes after them, that future generations will also be confronted with the challenge of people and forces wanting to limit free speech. So I see my work in a broader historical context, because when you study the history of free speech, it's very clear that it has been the same debate all the way through history. And the arguments are more or less similar. So I just think that I have provided material for future generations who would like to find out and understand what this is about. Then coming back to the question I posed in the beginning, how do we manage this growing diversity of opinions, the digital technology and migration, and at the same time safeguard fundamental freedoms like freedom of speech and freedom of religion and freedom of assembly? I basically think that there are 2 ways to go. And of course I'm simplifying now to make my point, but I think you understand what I'm getting at. One way is to say, if you accept my taboo, I'll accept yours. If it's a criminal offense to publish cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad, it should also be a criminal offense to publish cartoons of Jesus Christ, of Buddha, of Shiva goddesses, and so on and so forth. And if it's a criminal offense to publish cartoons of gods, then it should also be a criminal offense to publish cartoons of secular gods, if you want to adhere to the principle of equality before the law. So we should also ban cartoons of Karl Marx. I don't know if there are any Marxists left in South Africa. Or Milton Friedman, or Adam Smith, or whoever it might be. And if you accept not to ridicule and mock believers and non-believers, what is sensitive to them, then you should also be willing to criminalize what is sensitive to other people. In most European countries, we have laws criminalizing Holocaust denial. I am against those laws, even though I don't want to make any equivalence between cartoons mocking a religion and mocking the memory of 6 million people who were killed in Europe during the Second World War. I think there is a big difference, but I think it's a moral difference and it shouldn't be a legal difference. These laws in Europe has in fact triggered similar laws in Eastern Europe, where they have passed laws criminalizing the crimes of communism. And because Holocaust denial is a criminal offense in Europe, Switzerland has passed a law criminalizing denial of the Armenian Holocaust. And in Eastern Europe, the Baltic states, one of the Baltic states has passed a law criminalizing the fact that Latvia was occupied first by Nazi Germany and then by Soviet Russia. And as a response to this, the Russian parliament, 3 years ago, passed a law criminalizing criticism of the behavior of the Soviet Union during the Second World War, because this is what is sensitive to them. Today, in fact, is Victory Day in Moscow. It is the biggest national holiday and what in fact unite Russians. They are divided on so many things, but they are united in their version of Victory Day. So this is a holy thing to them, but it's also, of course, for practical political reasons, because the victory in the Second World War is the ticket for Russia to a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. So if you try to question the behavior of the Soviet Union during the Second World War, that they in fact occupied other nations and they committed a lot of crimes against in the countries they passed through, then you are in fact questioning the legitimacy of Russia as a great power within the UN. And this has also been repeated, in fact, in Bangladesh, where you had a civil war in 1971. I think a lot of people were killed. 500,000 people is the official number, but historians believe it was far less, maybe not more than 100,000. But they had passed a law criminalizing, questioning the number of people that were killed during the Civil War. So if you're a serious historian and you go to the archives and you write that not 500,000 people were killed, but in fact just 100,000, you can go to jail. So these memory laws, blasphemy laws, hate speech laws, they are proliferating all over the world based on the principle, if you accept my taboo, if you want your taboo protected, I also want my taboo protected. And it has led to a situation where we don't talk about rights of the individual. It has led to a situation where history, culture, and religion insist on enjoying human rights. But that's the wrong way to go. It is human beings who enjoy human rights, not history, not culture, not religion. And it makes it very, very difficult for free speech advocates to defend free speech across borders when you don't have a common golden standard anymore. Because these peculiarities leads to a situation where there is no common ground. Because everybody refers to their own specific history, their own specific culture, their own specific religion, and so on and so forth. And they forget, and that is in a way, it is a way of a form of identity politics on the level of the state. So, I don't believe that is a good way to go, as you may understand. And I think it believes to the title of my book, A Tyranny of Silence. Because no matter what you say in a globalized world, a digital world, and a world that is multicultural, multi-ethnic, and multi-religious, there will always be somebody out there who will be offended by what you say, and therefore has the right to shut you down or criminalize your speech if you accept this rule. If you respect my taboo, I respect yours. So, in spite of the fact that this may sound nice on the surface, because we don't want to offend one another, it is it has very draconian consequences if you follow that principle. The other way to go that I am in favor of is to ask the question, what are the minimal limitations we need on speech in order to be able to live together in peace? And I can think of three, and there may be more, but three fundamental limitations. One fundamental and two others that I'm willing to accept. And the key limitation that we need on speech anywhere is incitement to violence. Nobody should have the right to go on the radio in Rwanda and call for the killing of people belonging to another tribe. But I'm also of the opinion that incitement, in order for incitement to violence to be a criminal offense, you need a clear and present danger, which for instance means that I'm not in favor of banning the Quran, the way that Get Wilders is. There are some verses in the Quran that can be qualified as incitement to violence. Go out and kill the infidels wherever you find them. Go out and kill the Jews wherever you find them. That is in a way incitement to violence, but I don't think that there is a clear and present danger that words will be followed by action immediately, and therefore I don't think that we should ban the Quran. For that matter, the Bible, where you also have some draconian verses as well, even though that is way back in history when it comes to Christianity. So incitement to violence, the other limitation that I'm willing to accept is libel law in a very narrow, defined way. I think that if people deliberately lie about other people's or companies' reputation, we should have the right to take them to court, and if they're not able to prove what they say, it should have some consequences. But I repeat, it has to be a very narrowly defined libel law. In some countries, those libel laws are used by politicians to shut down their opponents, and we should not, it should not go that way. And finally, I'm in favor of protection of privacy. I don't think that the media has a right, or the state for that matter, to invade our privacy and make things public about our private lives, as long as we are not elected politicians, where people have a right to know details about our private lives that are relevant for our executing our offices. But apart from that, I believe more or less that everybody should have a right to say whatever they think. That's not easy, I can tell. It's pretty difficult. And diversity of culture, religion, and ethnicity and opinion is very painful. And as a free speech advocate, I would like to stress this, because some of my allies, they feel uncomfortable when they have to admit that free speech can be painful and hurtful. It can. But it is just words. And I am vehemently against the equation of words with violence. Words are not the same as violence. Yes, words can be painful, but words are the way we work out our disagreement, and words are in fact the way we also express our dislike and hate without resorting to violence. And that is the fundamental, I think, achievement of a civilized civilization. So we need, in order to make this happen, to re-establish a very clear distinction between words and deeds. Around the world, this distinction is being eroded because people, more and more people make the point that words can be as painful as actual violence, and therefore we have to treat words as if they were deeds. I just want to remind you that the introduction of the distinction between words and deeds was made after the wars of religion and at the time of the Enlightenment in Europe. Before that time, words was in fact seen as deeds. And when blasphemers and heretics and freethinkers criticized the Christian church, it was being perceived as a physical attack on the church, because words were deeds and on God. And therefore these people had to be destroyed to protect the political, social, and economic order. So that is what the equation of words with deeds leads to. The most important achievement in the fight against censorship and for freedom of expression and for tolerance was the establishing of this distinction between words and deeds. And so this is one thing that we have to do to reintroduce a very clear distinction between words and deeds. The other thing we have to do is to reconquer the close relationship between freedom and tolerance. To many people around the world, there is a natural tension between tolerance and freedom. A lot of people say we need to balance tolerance and freedom. And the problem is that the widest distance you see or you understand the connection between tolerance and freedom in a less free, in a less tolerant society you live in, the more authoritarian and the more oppressive a society you live in. Freedom and tolerance are two sides of the same coin. Also, historically, how did the concept of religious tolerance come into the world? Because we didn't start out with political tolerance or freedom of expression. We started out with the fight for religious freedom and religious tolerance. And then came freedom of expression and political freedom later on. The concept of religious tolerance grew out of the wars of religion in Western Europe or in Europe in the 16th and 17th century, when Christians, Catholics and Protestants for decades killed one another in tens of thousands of numbers. And at some point, Catholics and Protestants came to the understanding that this cannot go on forever. We have to come to some kind of agreement. And so they introduced these edicts of tolerance in different parts of Europe, which implied that Catholics would stop killing Protestants even though they hated their faith and they hated the Protestant church. And Protestants would stop killing Catholics in Protestant-dominated regions for the same reason. And it paved the way for freedom of religion. It meant that people belonging to a minority faith could live in countries or regions or city-states where there was another dominating faith without being killed. So this is, in fact, the way tolerance came into the world. And tolerance, in fact, means the ability to live with things that you dislike or hate, without resorting to violence, intimidation, and threats, and without trying to ban it. That is the concept of tolerance. Unfortunately, tolerance today to many people means exactly the opposite. It means that you have to shut up. I have been accused of being intolerant and publishing those cartoons, while in fact the intolerance is on them who have tried to ban them, to threaten, intimidate, and commit violence. So I think it's very, very important that we reinstitute the original concept of tolerance in order to promote freedom of speech. And as I said, this is not easy. It's going to be very, very difficult. But let me end, before I have to take your questions, with a modest proposal. In Denmark, in Western Europe, when people in public office police officers, nurses, community officers, when they say something insulting or offensive to their clients, usually they are being sent to sensitivity training in order to learn to behave. I think that we all in this increasingly diverse world need to be sent to insensitivity training in order to make it easier to live in this increasingly diverse world of cultures, ethnicity, religion, and opinion without limiting freedom of expression. Thank you for your patience. I'm looking forward to taking your questions.
And please try and keep your questions to the point as possible.
Thank you very much for your talk. I'd like to ask two very brief questions. The first is there ever a good basis for deplatforming someone after they've been invited to speak at an event?
Excuse me?
Is there ever a good basis for deplatforming, in other words, uninviting someone? And the second is this. So, the South African Constitution has a couple of limitations to free speech. We have a very broad right to free speech. We say that there shall be no propaganda for war, no incitement of imminent violence, which you've spoken about. The third is our hate speech provision, which is that there shall be no advocacy of hatred based on one of four listed grounds: race, gender, ethnicity, and religion, and that constitutes incitement to harm, noting that the imminency requirement is removed and violence is downgraded down to.
I want to reference a part of your
Yes.
talk that references the fact that you are a person with manners and you eat with your hands.
Okay, yes.
The thing I'd like us to consider, it's not necessarily a question, is what is the role of empathy in all of this? Because, and I'm using that particular example as a benchmark for that which you consider to be right versus, something that a whole bunch of the world does not consider to be right. And our ability not to empathize with the perspective and the actions of a particular group of people as a way of framing the debate. What is the role of empathy, and what's the consequence of not having empathy in this particular debate? Does that make sense?
Okay, I'm answering. Sure, but there's already 4 questions here. But
hello. Yeah, thank you very much for a very interesting talk. We were asked to keep the questions short, so I shall respect that. I'd like to ask you, when, if ever, has there been a golden age of free speech, and what benefits did it bring?
You have very rightfully noted that a lot of the debates around freedom of speech and admissible grounds as West companies' free speech is in fact not anything new. A lot of the principles have been with us since the Enlightenment, and we are not effectively reinventing the wheel here. What you are stating here is pretty trite, and it's certainly part of South African jurisprudence, and in South Africa it's part of wider jurisprudence. Why do you think there is an assault on all these freedoms, namely of speech, of religion, and of assembly, as traditionally interpreted within the West? You have mentioned that there is criticism of them from outside the West and other civilizations such as Islam, but we certainly see within the West a lot of deep, profound criticism and downright disdain for those principles. Where do you think they originate, and what makes them to be? What ideology informs the criticism of those freedoms?
I have 6 questions here. Can I? Okay, I start answering. This is another day lecture. But, well, I try to keep brief, even though it's usually quite difficult for me. Deplatforming. I don't think that there is any good reason for deplatforming anyone. If there are people on a campus who would like to invite somebody, I think no one should have the right to turn this person down. And in fact, here I'm quoting the Dean of University of Chicago. University of Chicago some time ago put out a very great text that they are against safe spaces, using microaggressions for shutting down speakers, and so on and so forth. And Dean Mr. Timmer was asked, what are you doing if, what will you do if some of the students invite Richard Spencer, who is a neo-Nazi, white supremacist? And he said, if there are students on campus who would like to invite Mr. Spencer, they should have that right. And then other students group can invite other people. They can organize a demonstration or whatever they want. I think, why is this important? Because it's not because I agree with anything of what these guys stand for, but I believe that we live in a time where social media is reinforcing echo chambers and bubbles, and it's very rare that we are being exposed to point of views that we don't like on social media, because the algorithm and the business model of Facebook, Twitter, and so on and so forth is built to make us feel comfortable. And I spent some time in the US right now, and it turns out that during the election campaign, a lot of anti-Trump voters, they just couldn't understand that he won. Can't be so, because throughout the campaign I never came across a Trump supporter, so there can't be anyone out there. There was, because they were living in their own echo chambers and bubbles. So I don't think that anyone should have a right to deplatform if there are people who would like to. It's also a violation of free speech for those who would like to invite, because free speech implies also the right to listen to and read what you want. Then the second part was about war propaganda. We don't have that in the Danish constitution, but that's maybe because it's been such a long time since we fought wars. But we do have hate speech laws, and I'm against those laws. And I'm against them both as a matter of principle, because I think it's very difficult to define what hate is. When I wrote my book on the cartoon crisis, I looked into the Council of Europe, and it turns out that they could come up, I think, with 35 different definitions, and this is only in Europe. The other thing is that hate speech laws usually are being used to silence speech that you don't like. This goes on all over the world, and I agree with an American constitutional expert, Robert Post, who writes that hate speech laws is not about eradicating hate. It is about enforcing one group's social norms on everybody else. And this works easily in a homogeneous society where everybody agrees on the norms. But in our world, where we have different religions, different cultures, different national backgrounds, this in fact becomes a way of enforcing inequality, because people believe in different things. And I also think that, one man's hate speech is another man's poetry. What is blasphemy for Christians is sacred to Muslims, and vice versa. So that is, the matter of principle. As a matter of practice, I'm against it because I don't think it's the most effective way to fight the opinions behind hate speech. At the height of the cartoon crisis, I was quite often confronted with the example of Nazi Germany. And people say to me, you should be careful publishing those cartoons because we know what happened in Germany in the 20s and 30s. And even though I don't accept the analogy, I looked into the history of Weimar Germany, and I found out to my surprise that leading Nazis were in fact taken to court in Nazi Germany for hate speech against Jews. If you take Julius Streicher, the executive editor of Der Stürmer, who published these nasty anti-Semitic cartoons, he in fact went to jail twice. And his magazine was confiscated or taken to court 36 times in the course of 10 years, from 1923 until 1933. And the result of these court cases, in fact, promoted his celebrity. He received a platform in the courts for promoting his own hateful ideas. The same with Joseph Goebbels, propaganda minister of Hitler. He several times attacked the vice police director of Berlin, Bernhard Weiss, who was Jewish. And Weiss took him to court and he won all the cases. But it didn't matter that much in the end, unfortunately. In Yugoslavia, to take a more recent example, you had a very, very severe law against incitement of ethnic hatred. You could go to jail for 10 years for telling an ethnic joke in a restaurant or waving a national flag on a soccer stadium. But when the ethnic conflicts started, this law didn't mean anything to him. So it's both a matter of principle and of the way you in fact fight this kind of speech that I don't believe that we need. It doesn't mean that I don't think that speech can cause harm. It can, but it's not the right remedy. I think we have to learn to talk back. Instead of banning. And I don't know of any individual who has changed his mind because his opinions were attacked. They're just being driven into the underground, and people are meeting behind closed doors, and so on and so forth. And I also think it's a good thing to have it out in the open so we know who our enemy is. And whom we have to fight. Then there was a question from you about sympathy and empathy, and I think that's about empathy, sorry, which is a very good question. And in fact, I deal a bit with it in the end of this book, because it's also a quite often used phrase that we need to show empathy, and empathy is very important. It is. But unfortunately, the meaning of empathy has been distorted. And most people confuse empathy with sympathy. That if you show empathy, it automatically means that you are sympathetic to that person. But that's not what empathy in fact means. It means putting yourself in another person's shoes and seeing him or her as she is. And empathy is, in fact, what a psychotherapist does with a client. And it doesn't mean that you have to, support or applaud everything the client does. It implies that you see your client as he and she is, in spite of all the defenses and distortions and lies and so on and so forth. So yes, I think empathy is very important, but I think it's a telling sign of our times that the meaning has been distorted to be the equivalent of sympathy, which is something very different. Golden age of free speech. If you talk about my own country, Denmark, and that part of the world, I would say 20, 25, 30 years ago was a golden age of free speech. But I think the general point I would like to make is that, unfortunately, usually there is no golden age of free speech, because free speech is difficult, and the powers that be and pressure groups and others, they would like to shut down speech. But I want to make this point, that free speech or speech has been important in the fight for minorities' rights all the way through history. When I speak in the United States, and also when I debated this Muslim community leader today, he made the point of power and privilege, that you have to understand the power dynamics in order to make it clear that I don't have a right to talk that much because I'm white, I'm male, and so on and so forth. But the fact of the matter is, if you take the civil rights movements, if you look at Martin Luther King, if you go further back and read Frederick Douglass after the American Revolution, it's very clear that in the fight against slavery, in the fight for emancipation, free speech was crucial. And the powers that be tried to shut down these social movements for change. It's the same with women, it's the same with homosexuals, it's the same with all social movements of people who are fighting for their rights. That they need free speech, in fact, more than the powerful. And that's why I try to convince my minority friends around the world that you should not speak out in favor of hate speech laws, because when they are necessary, they will be turned against you, and when they are not necessary anymore, you don't need them, because civil society will be able to manage and take care of you. So that, I think that is a very important point. Then the question about the assault on free speech, why is it going on? Is it based in any ideology? Because, I mean, we have known these things since the Enlightenment, and nevertheless, things are just getting worse. We are not getting any wiser. I think it partly has to do with ideology, with the fact that if you take the US, the UK, post-modernist theory is very powerful, especially at liberal colleges, where Foucault, Lyotard, Derrida, and Herbert Marcuse, if you also want to take the Frankfurter School, they don't believe in free speech. And they basically say this is all about power and privilege. And power is everywhere. And it's also about identity politics, which in fact means that it is impossible for me as a white, privileged male to have a conversation with a minority representative, black person or Muslim in the United States, because we have so different experiences that we cannot talk and have a meaningful conversation across identity lines. I think that is very sad, because it puts more importance on what divides us than what we share. And we share, in fact, much more than divides us. We share the same genes. We are all human beings. But this is a popular trend, unfortunately, in many places. But I think there is a more fundamental thing here that doesn't have so much to do with ideology, but with human nature. And that is that most of us would like to be free. We don't want outside our parents or the government or bosses to tell us what to do and decide for us. We want to be free. And that is natural. What is not natural to human being is to be tolerant. The instinct of human being is to shut down, to spit out food that you don't like, to turn off the TV when there's somebody talking there with whom you disagree or don't like. So tolerance is in many ways unnatural. And that makes it a very fragile concept. It's something that we have to learn. And when you are being taught in school that you have a right not to be offended, that you have a right not to listen to point of views that you don't like, it makes it very difficult to promote tolerance. And that's why free speech will always be in dire straits as long as people are not being taught to be tolerant of speech that they hate, opinions that they hate, point of views that they don't like.
More and more the same interest in putting forward the same ideas. And nowadays, what you have to say matters a lot less than whether you have the money to pay for it to be out there, or whether the market, the so-called market, will want to accept what you say. So, for example, we don't hear about drone strikes under Donald Trump's government, which have killed children already. All we hear is that Kim Kardashian bought a new sock. And I just think that, is that not a form of self-censorship, which is not due to fear, but just due to ignorance that has resulted from such a high dominance of modern media by capitalist principles?
Hi. I would like to know what impact do you think fake news will have on freedom of speech?
Hi there. I just have a quick question regarding the sort of criteria you do for when the base level of limits can be placed on free speech. I just want to get a distinction between you, because you also said that you are against outlawing Holocaust denialism, but one of the criteria, or one of the criterions rather, for the base limits of free speech is the fact that something ought not to be a lie. So I just wanted to see the distinction between the two, how you would distinguish between those.
Do you fear that any criticism to, for example, to Islam or the message that you send with the cartoons can be shut down because it's associated with this so-called populism or extreme right wing or something like that?
Could you please repeat? I didn't.
No, I said, do you fear that any criticism of Islam or any so-called weak group or vulnerable group can be shut down because it's associated with populism, with Le Pen, with Wilders, with Donald Trump?
It's difficult to be critical of Islam because you risk being associated with populist groups and parties.
Yeah.
Is that your question?
Yes, and do you think that's a threat to freedom of speech today?
Mr. Rose, what is the strongest argument you've ever heard against your position? Thank you.
What was the question?
The strongest argument you heard against your position.
Yeah, the strongest argument against, the strongest logical argument against your position.
I was just wondering, censorship laws seem to be interactive. It's about not communicating certain things or about offending somebody, but how much of it is really about controlling what ideas people hold, where that's the real target of it? To censor somebody isn't about what they're communicating, but about prohibiting or controlling the ideas that they hold.
I mean, I can answer that very shortly. Censorship is about power.
Can I just make a point?
And that's it. I mean, it's about control and about having the right to decide. And when you have that, information is power. Deciding what is being allowed to say in public is about power. I think that is the key of censorship. And self-censorship is, the internalization of the kind of intimidation that follows. That used to come from the state, but today it also comes from the bottom up and has to do with political correctness, and you don't want to be outed as a racist. I mean, that's a very hurtful accusation to be met with. And therefore, I mean, a lot of people who may be on my side, they hesitate to speak out because they don't want to be labeled a racist.
I have a problem with words and deeds.
Yeah.
For me, they are interchangeable. If we think back to Rwanda and other being accused of being cockroaches. And once you diminish the humanity of someone with a word, what follows can be so tragic. And then, of course, it can only be righted years afterwards, after the bodies have already been piled up. We are approaching people's basic, I can't get the word, instinct. And they would respond to a word. It's a dirty Jew or it's a cockroach. Thank you.
Maybe I should answer that first. As I said, I do not deny that words can be hurtful. And they really do have psychological impact on people. I just believe that the alternative, criminalizing them, have many unintended consequences. And people don't have the same reaction to the same words. Cockroaches may be very harmful to one individual, but another individual may perceive it in a different way. There is a more fundamental point that I didn't make in my speech. I want to stress, I don't want to deny that words can be harmful, but why do I think that it is so important to distinguish between words and deeds? Because this is a fundamental distinction between a democracy and a tyranny, between a democracy and a dictatorship. Dictatorships and democracy criminalizes similar offenses. Bank robbery, tax evasion, shoplifting, fast driving. All of these offenses are criminalized both in democracy and dictatorships. The key difference when it comes to criminal offenses in dictatorships and democracy is that a dictatorship criminalizes words as if they were deeds. And that is why my friends among Soviet dissidents went to labor camps, because they were being accused of defaming the Soviet people or the social and political order in the Soviet Union. It was being perceived as a threat to the political and social order. And that is the way hate speech laws are being applied. And that's why I don't believe it's the right way to fight these hurtful words by criminalizing. It doesn't mean that I deny that they do have consequences for individuals who are being exposed, but I just don't think we should criminalize them in order to fight the opinions behind them. Then the first question was about capitalism, media. You know, I lived in a country, the Soviet Union, where there was no capitalism, and the media was controlled by one party. Even though I acknowledge that it is a challenge for pluralism if media power is concentrated in fewer hands, I prefer, market forces to drive this than having the state interfering and regulating too much. And the smartphone has given you and I an opportunity to communicate our ideas. And if we are smart enough, we can get a following. And there are many examples of this these days. But it is a challenge. But don't watch Fox News if you think Mr. Murdoch has too much power. Then there was a question about fake news. That's a very good question that I have been thinking about, in fact also writing about a bit. And this is a big issue in Europe right now. Partly because of Russia and Russia's interference or fear that Russia will interfere with European elections in France and Germany, the Netherlands, and so on and so forth. But also out of fear for populist forces. But fake news is nothing new. It used to be called false information, and it's been around for centuries. What of course is different is that we have the digital technology and the possibility to disseminate this kind of information. But in Europe, there are people in liberal democracies calling for the criminalization of fake news. In fact, Germany, a country that I admire highly, even though Denmark was occupied by Germany 70 years ago. Germany has been able to face its history and is a very strong, I would say, liberal democracy today. But as I also said, I'm against Holocaust denial laws in Germany, and I'm against the kind of hate speech laws. And the German Minister of Justice, Heiko Maas, in fact, recently proposed to criminalize fake news as if it was hate speech. And that really makes me shiver. As somebody who lived in a dictatorship in the Soviet Union, where the state had the right to determine what is lie and what is truth. I don't think it's up to the government to enforce laws about fake news. Even though I agree it is a challenge and there are many dangers connected to fake news, but it's not a job for laws and government to make decisions about what is truth and what is not, when it comes to opinions and news. Apart from the libel laws that we already have. And the interesting thing is that when Heiko Maas, the Minister of Justice of Germany, made this proposal, he was in fact, without knowing it, almost quoting from the Soviet Penal Code. Article 170, 190 and 70. Those two articles according to which Soviet dissidents were being sent to labor camps for decades. Defaming the Soviet political and social system. Deliberately lying about the Soviet political and social system. And he said it should be a criminal offense to deliberately disseminate lies about the political system in Germany or about political issues. Even though this is done out of good intentions, it will have disastrous consequences. And an Italian minister was more open about this. He said that we need to criminalize fake news on the level of the European Union in order to fight populist parties. That is, legitimate political parties. I don't vote for them. I don't like their ideology. I don't like their politics. But they are legitimate parties who are in parliament. So you want to adopt a law in order to criminalize news in favor of your political opponent. Even if it's fake news, I don't think that should be allowed, and it's very dangerous. And it all boils down to Europe's inability of dealing with this growing diversity, not only of cultures, ethnicities, and religions, but also of opinions. And the natural instinct among politicians is to say, well, let's ban some more speech in order to keep the social peace, instead of accepting that the more diverse a society is, the more freedom of expression it needs, in order to provide space to everybody to express themselves. But that's not the way things are going right now. Then there was a question about Holocaust denial and lies and truths. You know, in Germany, in fact, Holocaust denial used to be prosecuted in accordance with a libel law, that you were not allowed to defame the memory of deceased people. And that law existed until 1994, when Germany, in fact, introduced a Holocaust denial law, like all other European countries who have these kind of laws. I think that this is, in fact, about something very fundamental when it comes to the ideas of enlightenment and what I will call the liberal model, that we need to go back to the two fundamental principles that drive knowledge production and differences of opinion in a liberal society. And the first principle is that there is no final say, that everybody has to accept the notion that we may be wrong. We all know that the Holocaust took place. There's no question about that. But it doesn't mean that we should ban people's right to say stupid and outrageous things and refute their arguments with documentation. If they're not able to provide evidence for their point of views, it will not become knowledge. So there can be no final say in this liberal model. And if there is no final say, then no one has the right to put himself or herself above others and say, I am right and you are wrong. Which means that there is no personal authority for determining what is true and what is false. It means I cannot say I'm the Pope and therefore this is the truth. I cannot say because I'm white, because I'm black, because I'm Muslim, because I'm Christian, this is right and what you're saying is false. No personal authority and no final say. It should be the epistemological constitution of a liberal democracy. And unfortunately, this model is being undermined. It used to be by political and religious fundamentalists. Political fundamentalists, like the communists, who said, we are in possession of the truth, and therefore we have to exterminate all who believe otherwise. Or the Catholic Church, or Ayatollah Khomeini, who in an interview with Oriana Fallaci many years ago said, I never experienced a single case in my life when I was wrong. Okay. This is the way the fundamentalist speaks. And the threat to the liberal principles of no final say and no personal authority used to come from that part of the spectrum. Today, the threat comes from humanitarians, people who want to do good and who are willing to sacrifice these fundamental principles in the name of not insulting, not causing offense, and in the name of saying that your perspective has equal importance as mine. No, that's not true. Yes, we have freedom of speech, we have freedom of religion, but we do not have freedom of knowledge. You cannot insist that your perspective has value just because you belong to a minority or to a oppressed group. It has to be about your arguments and about the facts. So the humanitarians who are, as a first principle, are saying do not insult, they violate the fundamental principles of knowledge production and the way we grow as human beings. And it's very subtle, it's very difficult to counter, because contrary to the fundamentalists, who all are assholes, to be honest, we don't like them, because they oppress people in a very direct way and they are evil the humanitarians, they want to be nice. And who wants to speak out against people who want to be nice? It's far more difficult, and it's far more indirect way of oppressing speech and knowledge production. Yeah, there's still 2 more questions to go, but about populism in Europe and criticism of Islam, I think that used to be a problem, but I think more and more of the mainstream parties are willing to speak out about real problems. If you take the Dutch election a few months ago, Geert Wilders lost to Mark Rutte, the sitting Prime Minister from the Liberal Party, because the Prime Minister started to confront some of these issues, problems with integration, problems with equality, problems with freedom of speech, and so on and so forth. It was far worse 10 years ago, and speaking about myself, it's in Europe I'm not labeled a bigot. It's only in South Africa, in fact, as I was this morning on national radio. Because there is a growing understanding that the publication of cartoons was not just an empty provocation, and that in fact I'm willing also to defend the rights of Muslims as I defend the rights of everybody else. But we should have a right to criticize any religion, any set of ideas, if we feel they are contrary to our own values. And then the last question, strongest argument put against me. That's really difficult. No, I think, I mean, the lady over there asked me a question about, not words, I think the equation of words and deeds, I think that's easy to refute. But the fact that words, in fact, can be harmful, and therefore it needs to have some legal consequences when people express them in that way. I have a lot of sympathy for that argument. I have just read too much. I've just looked into too many cases and arrived at the conclusion that it's really not the most effective way to fight this. And on the other hand, if you accept this equivalence between some words and deeds, you really end up in a place where you do not want to be if you support free speech, even though I have some sympathy for the argument, and it's very human. Okay, thank you.
Like to make a few points. The first is that you may have noticed that the event is being recorded. The reason for this is we had envisaged it to be a public lecture. It was open to all members of the public, and we would like to be able to share it to those who are not able to join us this evening. On Flemming Rose that I neglected to introduce myself. For those of you who are interested, I'm Gwen Ngwenya. I'm the CEO of the Institute of Race Relations. And on behalf of the Institute, I'd like to thank Flemming Rose for joining us this evening. And also to you for joining us and being open to a discussion on what might be an otherwise controversial issue. And as Flemming Rose alluded to earlier, to a piece I wrote in the Daily Maverick earlier this week, is that we did not envisage this evening to be in any way a watershed moment for freedom of speech in South Africa. Instead, we felt that it's incumbent on those of us who are engaged in the battle of ideas to act as that frog in water and to be able to sense the slight changes in the temperature, to be aware of the slight tipping of the scale towards tyranny, and for those of us engaged in that battle of ideas on a constant and daily basis, to be involved in nudging the needle when we can towards freedom, and hopefully this evening contributed towards that. So thank you all for joining us, and please do feel free to remain in this particular room to enjoy any wine that may still be left on your tables. Unfortunately, Flemming Rose does have other engagements that I need to get into now, so he will not be available for questions. Thank you for joining us, and have a good evening.